welcome back. And with me today is Teresa Brock and Todd Wilkins. Hey guys, wanted to give you an update on the Hardline. I thought it was one of my favorite Court Gentry gray man novels. Emotional, action-packed, but a lot of new feelings that are in the head of Mark Greaney that he's putting on paper. So I think this is going to be a really enjoyable one for everybody that picks it up. Teresa?
I 100% agree. I think this book hits a little different. I loved the dialogue in this book. That's probably my favorite part of it. And I love when you get connections, without giving any spoilers of things that happened a long time ago that come forward and they come together. And that was the best part.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, I will always say the book is only as good as its antagonist, and he cooked up a really, really relatable one in this one. The entire theme of this book is going to hit people very differently based on the stage of their life, and then I'm hoping, based on how it leads in a kind of a cliffhanger, that we get more along this storyline in the next couple books. So, fantastic one, and yeah, everyone's going to love this.
Absolutely. So from Best Thriller Books, The Hardline by Mark Greaney is a not to miss book. Don't miss it. Hey, well, welcome back to another edition of BTP Roundtable with Best Thriller Books. Today with us on the Best Thriller Books side is Teresa Brock, Todd Wilkins, myself, Chris, and today a very special author, the man who created The Gray Man, who has become a Netflix instant classic starring Ryan Gosling and Anna de Armas. Mark Greaney. Mark, thank you for joining us today. Welcome on.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.
We
Yeah.
know that The Hardline is your latest novel. We're excited to see another Mark Greaney book hit the shelf. What does The Hardline mean to you, as I believe it is your 15th Gray Man novel?
Yeah, and I first off, thanks for having me. Secondly, I still don't know what it means to me. I can't believe that there have been 15 of these, and I've been asked all through my career if I saw this as a long-running series or if I ever imagined this or that. And I truly was just trying to become a published author when I wrote The Gray Man and didn't have aspiration. I mean, who doesn't have aspirations? But I didn't really, see beyond the first book, getting that out and making that as good as possible. But as the series picked up and I wrote a second and a third installment, you start to throw in little things really just to develop the characters, about their history and about their past and about affiliations and things like that. And I always think that's fun when you read a book and you don't feel like everything started on page one. There's some history to the characters. I think that's a cool, uh, just kind of like texture that you can put in a book. So I did that a lot in my early series, and here we are in book 15, and I just kind of wanted to think about some of the little things that I'd mentioned along the way about Court's family life when he was a kid, about Zach's family, just other little teases that I've done along the way. They weren't written to, um, someday pay it off with a book, but they were just things that have always been in the back of my head. So as this 15th book came together, I was like, I'm going to go back and sort of explore some things that were interesting to me as just little asides that I put in earlier. So it's amazing to be that deep into a series to where you can go back and do that. So I'm just lucky to have people that read this book to give me that opportunity.
Well, I love the answer, but more importantly, I love every year that we get to wait for another Gray Man book to come out. So this one was one of my favorites. I say that every year. It's hard to not say,
Thank you.
it's my newest favorite. But Teresa, go ahead. What do you have for him?
Well, you kind of started the conversation. This book hits differently. There is an emotional weight to it. So, compared to writing this one compared to past books, how was the challenge? How was that challenge different, or what did it come out different?
I think I've become more and more obsessed with not doing something I've done before with each book. And that's just kind of my mantra. And that's the thing as we get into like May, June, and July. My books are really, I think that in my contract, they're due in June. I've never turned one in before July, but it's usually like August. And some have not even come in till, September. But each year, as I get into that late part of the season, I really get self-conscious. I'm not a super confident writer. I wish I were. I sit on panels with writers at writers conferences, and everybody just gives this like really cool answer of how they do things, and I'm going like, I just sit there and think it sucks like 4/5 of the time and just keep working on it. But I approached this book differently because I just wanted to do it different. And as I started thinking about the villains, and I'm sure we'll get into that, uh, the villains' motivations, the book became more and more interesting to me because I wanted to kind of make his motivations make sense. You don't have to root for the villain. I don't want you to do that. But at the same time, I don't want people to go like, oh, he's the villain because he's got a black hat on. That's what makes him the villain. He's the villain because Mark said he's the villain at the beginning. I really want you to go, well, what he's doing is villainous or he's the antagonist, but it completely makes sense. And so once I really got deep into the character of Campbell Coyle, who's I guess the main antagonist in this book, there's a few, but um, this book just became a lot more interesting for me to write and to play off of him and Court and their similar relationships. And um, I'm not too worried about spoilers. So, I can just say that they've got these things that make them very similar and I guess things that make them different. And so that's a long way of saying this story was different for me because it has all the action that the other books do, but like you said, I think it's got more texture to it and some nuance. And that was just really fun to write and explore.
Yeah, I'll just add to the kind of the family theme there. The additional layer you had to the antagonist motivation really caught me in a good way, because normally I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense, even though it's relatable. But when you added that additional layer to it, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's some foresight there. I really did, particularly in thrillers and stuff. That I really hats off to you for that. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So the follow up family question to that is, because this was such a family oriented in relationship, can we potentially, are we going to get some family for Court in the future potentially? Is that something you've kind of batted around and explored in your brain, being like, maybe if I did do a little, something down the line, is that something you have planned out perhaps?
Definitely not planned out. If I tell you no and then I do it a couple of years from now, you're going to take it
I'm going to
personally.
call you out. Yeah.
Yeah. I
I
have
called
no
it.
plans to do. Has that, let's think back because you guys all read these books. Has that been pulled off successfully? And I mean, I know Mitch Rapp, but
Wrap a bit.
yeah.
I mean, Hurwitz, there's a kind of a family for a
Right,
few
right,
books
right,
in
right.
there,
Yeah, with
so
an
that's
asterisk.
why I
Yeah.
was curious. Yeah. Taylor, has got, so there's bits and pieces
Yeah.
in other series. So that's why I was curious. I was like, all right, is it Court's time? Like, is that going to be an additional component to the series? But
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know. And now if I do it, you're going to think you're the one that came up with it. So either way,
Totally, absolutely. Ask any of
it
these
might be a
guys.
success.
I claim everything, so it's fine. But no, yeah, Chris, I have 100 questions, but yeah, Chris, you would have
No, I was
grabbed
I
one.
was
Yeah.
gonna kind of tab off that.
Yeah.
I think we see relationships come and go a lot with families in these series because
Yeah.
they could potentially tie a character down to a location or make them
Right.
hesitant or whatever it may be. It affects how they operate, and specifically with these people that are on the dark side of, you know, the world.
Right.
Like they don't need that. It's a
Mhm.
distraction, and I think that that's something that a lot of authors probably think about, and that's just I'm not an author, so that's what I would think you think about.
Yeah.
But in the same vein, there's so many cool things that you can make these people do that I've never really thought about either. And getting into the fact like the decrepit shoot house, like out in the middle of the woods, like that,
Yeah.
Awesome.
like I'm thinking in my mind, like, that's awesome. Like
Oh, thank you.
but it sounds like just like something that anybody should be able to come up with. But the fact that they've been there before, you have a legend and history made in that building years before it even comes into play, which
Yeah.
makes that so cool. Like how did that come? Like how did the shoot house become a key point in a big battle in this story?
Yeah. I mean, for those that haven't read the book, the late in the
Spoiler
story.
alert.
Yeah, no, that's not. I'm not worried about that. It's just so people know what we're talking about. Yeah, late in the story, Court goes back to Florida where he was raised, and he was basically raised in a shoot house, and if you don't know, a shoot house is a a big building where SWAT teams train or law enforcement units train, where you can sort of like put in fake bars and fake bedrooms, and gives them training on how to do room clearing and close quarter tactics. And I've been in a bunch of shoot houses doing training, or actually opposition force op force stuff, where you're the bad guy and the SWAT team comes in to shoot you. And so I've spent time in those things, and I guess it's always been in the back of my mind. And again, I'm trying to not do the same thing over and over. And I got a note one time from one of the screenwriters from The Gray Man when I met him at the premiere, and Steve McFeely, who is who writes some of the Marvel movies. And he was telling me, how much he loved the series. And he's like, "Oh, your best books are this one, this one, and this one." Um, and then he goes, "If I could give you one note." And I was like, "Yeah, sure." He's like, "Yeah, no more abandoned buildings for a while. You kind of do the abandoned building thing a lot." And I was like, "Yeah." At that point, I was writing a Gray Man story, and there was a big scene in an abandoned building in New York, and I was like, "Crap, I'm totally changing that." I kind of went away with my tail between my legs, but it's true. And the reason you do that as a writer is you kind of want a general area that's three-dimensional that people can kind of see in their mind, and then the location is not the important thing. So, if you say it's a, whatever, a data center on the third floor of such and such building, people can't necessarily see that. But when you kind of describe, this big abandoned building with, leaky roof or whatever, people can pick up on that. So this is my new abandoned building is very specific, because early in the series I talked about how Court spent a lot of time in his father's shoot house growing up, and I wanted there to be this scene with Court and his father back in that shoot house decades after anybody had used it. And it was a fun scene to write, and it was a fun scene to anticipate because it comes late in the book. And so I've been writing the book for 6 or 7 months, and I'm like, "Oh, I can't wait till I get to that part, because I bet I can do a lot of words in a day, because I can see that action in my head already."
Yeah. Well, I that leads me to my next question. It's kind of a sprout off of this and what you just said with the abandoned building. Do authors typically find a security blanket that they continue to throw into a book? And would yours have been the abandoned building, or what is your security blanket you go to for I need something, I know this works wherever I'm at in the story?
Yeah, I bet we all do, and we don't necessarily know what it is until we get called out on it. Maybe, I don't know, but yeah, for me, my security blanket is dialogue, and specifically like dialogue between Court and Zach, sarcasm, that sort of thing. I think you can kind of. I like stories that have lightness and dark, and waves, and you can have a really intense scene, and then there's gallows humor in it. And I think that's probably my crutch. I like to go back to more than other things. And probably it had been abandoned buildings, because there's probably 10 action scenes in a book, or I don't even know how many action scenes there are in a book. But I remember the directors of The Gray Man saying that there were 7 big action scenes in the first book that they wanted to use, and they only used 5 of them, and they were disappointed they couldn't use a scene that took place in Switzerland on a mountain, and some other scene. And so, however many set pieces there are, there's a bunch in each of these action books, and you're trying to do something different. And so, yeah, I probably do go back to some crutch here and there from time to time.
Yeah.
How do
Lisa,
you
did you?
pick your locations? Like for
Yeah.
the big action scenes, do they come as you're writing, or do you kind of know where they're going to be before you start, or even before the next one?
It's a big mishmash, and things don't, I don't always know what's coming up. A lot of times I just know how I want the story to go, and then I go, okay, well, there's going to be an action scene, and something in the narrative. Like for this one, I knew I wanted Court to go back to Florida where his dad lived, to kind of protect his father. And I don't think it was until I got really, deep into planning out that part of the story to where I was like, it should happen in the shoot house. But it wouldn't have made sense to happen in his dad's trailer, or just another scene on the road. I've never done a big highway action scene with moving vehicles, and I would like to do that someday. So I do kind of have these things like,
Yeah.
is there a way I can play that off? I've always wanted to do something with wingsuits, but everybody I know that has done wingsuit
Ooh.
and everybody I know, it's like two people. They just talk about how difficult it is and how you have to have thousands of jumps and all this other stuff. So it doesn't just seem
Yeah.
like, two guys are going to put on a wingsuit and then have a fight in the sky. I don't think that's very
Yeah.
realistic. So there's things like that to where I have general ideas I want to do, but a lot of times it's just kind of on the day. And I wanted to have a big train scene in Burner because I knew that they had to go from one place to another on a train, and I'm like, well, that seems like the time when the enemies would converge on them. So that just naturally became a train scene, an action scene. But it happens different ways in each book, and sometimes I kind of surprise myself by going like, well, that's a weird place to stage a fight, but it just the story dictates it, or else I have some kind of like daydream fantasy in my head about how it'd be cool to see people fighting in a wingsuit. Not in the same wingsuit, that would be weird.
Well, the wingsuit kind of leads to one of my questions. It's about your research process. You are known to do some pretty crazy things in the pursuit of research and authenticity. Besides flying with Jack, what's been your favorite kind of research activity that you were like, yes, this, I love doing this, and this is now a new hobby for me, and then really added to one of your books.
I mean, I would say scuba for sure. The
Yeah,
third book in the series, Ballistic.
yeah.
I was in Puerto Vallarta doing research, and I learned to dive, and I was very scared to do it. Like it was something, it was out of my comfort zone, but I fell in love with it, and I really like to do it. So that's something I go back to, and I try not to use it too much in the books, but I would use it. I think it's going to be in my new book. So
Love
I
it.
don't think there's any scuba diving in Hardline. You guys will correct me if there
No,
is.
yeah.
I don't remember anybody jumping in water, but it's possible. So I would say that I like to do a lot of stuff with firearms and shooting and learn about that stuff. So that is really, I started doing training with that. I wanted to be a writer, so long before the Gray Man, several years before the Gray Man, I started taking courses, and that kind of led me to coming up with the idea of the Gray Man. And I still do that stuff. In fact, my garage, I'm doing some shooting tomorrow. It's really more of a promotional thing, but my garage right now looks like I'm starting the revolution at my house. Everything is just piled up and gun after gun, and I've got to load it in my Tahoe tonight and keep my Tahoe in the garage and go out of town tomorrow to do some shooting. And so that's something that I've learned along the way that I liked. But really, more than anything else, is meeting the people that do this stuff. That's a cool aspect of it.
Nice.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Well, we were going to have Kashif on the show today, but he was unable to do it due to his jet setting, world traveling ways. But I do have a question from him.
Yeah.
And his was, are there any traits of court gentry, whether it's discipline, mindset, moral code, that you find yourself wishing you could borrow in your own day-to-day life?
Oh, sure. The discipline, and also this is going to sound weird. It's going to sound like it's a therapy session, but kind of that comfortable with being alone. Not that I'm not comfortable with being alone. I just traveled by myself in Austria or whatever. But he sort of is this loner to where I don't want to be like that, but I just think it would be like it gets in my head sometimes when I'm writing these scenes, going like, this guy is you know, just spent 6 days in a sniper hide or something. And I go like, I would go absolutely crazy and stuff like that. But I mean, it speaks to his discipline. And honestly, I'm disciplined in some ways, and in other ways, I'm not. I can be a procrastinator, and I can, come up with lofty ideas, but I don't get up early enough in the morning to do them sometimes, unless it's writing, which I have to do. Um, so yeah, I think just that raw discipline, and I get to meet a lot of people who are Delta Force or SEAL Team 6 or CIA and stuff like that, and so you're dealing with people that are kind of cut out of a different cloth than you. I was, sleeping in at college when these guys were going through buds, and I didn't grow up with that mindset. I didn't really become disciplined as a writer until I guess my very late 30s. And I think that would have paid dividends if I had grown up a little bit more like that. But he's also an assassin and screwed in the head in other ways. It's a
He might not be
trade-off.
right upstairs at times,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
I think we all wish we had a little bit more discipline
Yeah.
in our lives.
Yes.
Um, but going back to oh, where was it at? Teresa, if you have another question, go ahead.
How do you come up with your assassins' code names?
Oh, that's
Oh
fun.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a fun part. And it's not always the same way. Sometimes I'll just randomly hear a word and go like, "Oh, that's got to work into something." Like even like that could be a code name. And so in this book, Campbell Coyle, the Northern Irishman, his name is Whetstone. His code name is Whetstone, and I saw that in uh, some Second World War British code names I was looking at. So it was some. Also, there's a character in there named Jill, and she's in Ghost Town, the unit that Cord is working with now, and her code name is Gumdrop, and that was a British, I guess MI6 or whatever the OSS, um, their British Secret Service World War II code name that they used. So sometimes I get them like that. Sometimes it's just a word that I just hear randomly that I think, oh, that'd be a cool, code name. I think Whetstone had a different code name for a while, and I decided it was too goofy. It was too on the nose. It was some like dagger. Like a whetstone is something you use to sharpen knives with, and
That's
I
the
think
first thing I thought of when I heard it. So
yeah, that's what it is.
I
And
was
so I
like,
think he had some other name that was some sort of a blade or something, and I just decided that was a little too, code names in movies are usually like the person's name is, tough. Like very early in Courts, in the Gray Man series, I said his CIA code name was Violator, which is kind of a ridiculous CIA code name. Your code name would probably be Scott or something like that. And Night Train is one of my guys. That's very much for entertainment purposes. That's not so much for reality. But Whetstone was an actual code name for some British operation. I can't remember.
Do
well,
you have one that's your
Seafoam's a good one.
favorite?
I heard that's a good one.
One
So
that's my favorite. I liked calling Zach romantic for several years. I thought that
that's
would
good.
actually could be a real like call sign that somebody could be instilled on somebody. I mean, gosh, I read this thing about military or Air Force or pilots code, call signs, how they get their call signs. And some of it is just hilarious, and not in a good way. Like very sort of insulting. There was a guy named there was a guy whose call sign was Mangler, which sounds kind of cool, but he got it. Sorry to tell the story, but he got it because he got drunk in a bar in Key West and zipped his fly up and accidentally zipped up a testicle. And when the Air Force guys came to get him out of the hospital or see him in the OR, they saw that the reason that he was in the OR was called testicular mangling. And and so that became his call sign. And I'm not creative enough to come up with something like that. So
and he's got it on his helmet.
it's on that guy's helmet. I mean, I don't know that I think that might have been a Vietnam era story, but I mean, still,
Yikes.
if that
Oh,
guy's listening, chime in. I'd love to hear from you. How
how
you
you
doing?
doing? Well, going back to
Uh,
naming, my next question was on what drives your naming for the books in the series. Is it after you've created a story and you've got it, thought out in your head and you want the title to blend with the book, or do your publisher come to you and go, "Hey, this one's going to be called this, right?" How does that work?
It is this it's more the second than the first. I of all my titles, there's 15 books. I think I have come up with like 12 of the titles. And there was one I was going to call Weaponized, and they didn't like the title simply because the number of letters, it was going to be a smaller font on the cover. So we called it Agent in Place. There's more letters than that, but they're different words. And so
word.
that wasn't my title at all. It was my editor's title. And On Target, my second book, I called it Killer of Men the whole time I wrote it, and they just decided that title wasn't going to sell as well as something that didn't sound quite so aggressive. So the Hardline was not it actually was my title, but I think I had another title and I can't remember what it was, and they came back and didn't love it, and then so I just threw a bunch of titles at them, and they liked that one best out of the other. Um, of the titles that I gave them. So it's not always a sure thing the working title doesn't always make it. And I'm writing the 16th Gray Man book right now, and I don't have a title I'm sure about. It might be called Dark State, but that may change 17 times between now and when we get a title for it. But they like to, put the cover out early, in the spring. So they'll probably, lock onto a title pretty soon. Or we're definitely having the discussions now, but nothing's really, CR6, I was sure of that title. Burner, I was sure of that title. Midnight Black, I was sure of that title. But the Hardline, I can't remember what I was calling it for most of it. It took a while to come up with a title, but I had a different. I think I wanted to call it something else, but it was something that had been used. Oh, a Bloodline, and that had been used by so many other people.
So many, yeah.
Yeah, so I get that.
On how quick the world and news changes right now. I know you just got back from a research trip. Guessing where the world may be in 3 to 4 months as you really get deep into it, do you ever really kind of adjust on the fly while you're writing, or once you start you're like, yeah, this is pretty much going to be it regardless of what's going on in the outer world? Because you're pretty good about having your pulse on things without it being insanely like, oh, he's making a statement about this or this. Like you thread that needle and have your entire career amazingly. So I'm just curious, like, if things change for you as you're editing or writing.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I kind of lock in on something and say, okay, I've got to go ahead and make a decision on where it's going to be when this book comes out, February 26 or February 27 or whatever. But as you're writing the story, events in the air, in the world can change. As I was writing Midnight Black, going back to last year's book, it involved military action in Ukraine. At the very end of the book, it wasn't really a story that took place in Ukraine, but the end of it did. And I was writing about how many missiles the Ukrainians were able to fire into Russia in one scene, or how many how many sorties they could put up. And I kind of wrote that into the story earlier. And then as I was watching the news, I would say, oh wow, they had a night where they sent over 320 drones, and I said that they sent over 80, and that was a big deal. So I adjusted the story, and I adjusted again as more things happened. And so, my final version of that book wasn't completely last draft done until October. So I was able to, or late September, I was able to kind of like keep up with the details. That actually the Ukrainians started fielding their own attack drone, and it was named after a loaf of bread that they have there. So that was something I didn't know about when I was writing the story, but in the later, edits, I put that in there, and it made it look like I really had my finger on the pulse of what was going on secretly in Ukraine. But it was just basically the book took me so long to finish that history was made, and I was able to cram it in there at the last second. Nice. So that's how that goes.
Awesome.
Yeah, Dmitri was killed by sourdough just doesn't have the same.
It's my new code name.
Yeah. Teresa?
So at the rate that technology is changing, AI, everything is going so fast. I mean, it's like a complete whirlwind. So from an author's perspective, it's kind of a two-part question. Do you want to avoid as much technology as you can when you're writing so it doesn't like date a book? And do you like looking and seeing how things have evolved over the course of a series?
The second, I don't worry about really dating a book, because you're kind of locked. If you're doing these contemporary stories, you're going to be locked in time, and there's nothing you do about it. You go back and read The Hunt for Red October. It's about the Soviet Union, and nobody hates The Hunt for Red October because it is. And so at one point in my career, I was like, okay, I've done like 3 books that involve Russia. I really can't do anymore. And I'm like, Jean Le Carre never said that, so why should I say that? Because it is what's going on in the world. And when it comes to technology, I like to write contemporary stuff, so you're just kind of stuck with it, and you write the newest stuff that you're aware of without being too technical. I'm not really a techno thriller writer, and yeah, it's going to be dated, or it's going to be kind of hackneyed down the road. I try and get things before they're things that people talk about. I use drones in like my 4th Gray Man book, very sort of individual surveillance drone. that was called Deadeye, and that was you weren't seeing a whole lot of that stuff then, like commercially, and 10 years later you are. And so I think I caught that like at the early wave, but now if you read Deadeye, you would not, even notice that it was unique the way that drones were being employed. So I wrote Chaos Agent a couple Gray Man books back, which was about, the latest stuff in weaponized AI, which I'm not researching that stuff anymore because the book's out, but I'm sure that what I've written in there is already dated 2 years later or 3 years later. And so that's just it's just a thing that is going to happen if you write these type of contemporary stories. So try not to worry about it too much. I mean, hey, Court hasn't aged in 17 years. So, there's little things that when you look at it, you go, you're kind of stuck like that.
So I did have a follow-on question for you.
Yeah.
You were talking about research and being in Austria and like, if you were to hide for 6 days, you want to go hang out with people, but like when you go to do research and like you're on a trip like that, and I know you've got Allison and a family now, like they're like, "Hey, let's go do dinner, let's go do breakfast," and you're like, "No,
I
I saw
gotta.
this street over here, and I got to go look at this sign, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna go just think for a while." Do you ever do
Yeah.
that? And you're like, "I can't." Like what's
Yeah,
that like?
when I travel, like with my wife, like this one, I went was totally by myself, and I didn't know anybody there. I didn't even really talk to people there. It wasn't a thing. Sometimes I'll go to like really talk to people and like almost interview people, but other times it's just I'm just going for the location and the vibe and to get ideas. But I've been with Allison and like we were in Zurich, and she'll go on trips. She used to live like up in upstate New York, so she's not really into lots of snow. So I'm like, I'm gonna go to the Alps, and she's like, yeah, I lived in Jackson Hole and I lived in Ithaca, so have a good time. I'll
Have
see you
fun
next
without
time.
me.
Yeah,
Let me
have
know when
fun
you're on a
without me.
beach. Yeah.
Yeah, I live in a very flat, hot area, although it's frozen solid now. But when I go with her, I'll be like, okay, I've got to go find a mailbox on a street corner in Zurich and, take pictures and talk about it. And she kind of really gets into it. It's that thing of not being a writer and thinking the writer can just explain things to you and they're going to make sense when you're writing a book, and you just can't. She'll be like, well, just tell me what's going on. I'm like, yeah, I can't. And she's like, what do you mean you can't? And I'm like, well, he's looking for a thing. It's like, well, have him come this way. I'm like, yeah, but he's on crutches or whatever. And she's like, we didn't say that. I'm like, right. That's the thing. There's like 250 pages before this happens. And it's kind of in my head more than anything else. So she really gets into it and she wants to, she definitely comes up with stuff. She's come up with actual funny lines I've used in the series, or in the books. And she's super proud of that. But yeah, it's a lot of it is like I've got to go do the non-cool non like this scene does not involve going to a really nice sushi restaurant in the in the Ritz-Carlton or whatever. Sorry. This
I'm
involves,
out.
like
Yeah.
eating beans or going to a like a post office. And when I was in Austria, I people were driving by on the street and I was taking pictures of a public toilet, and I realized, yeah, this probably looks weird. That always happens. I'm like, oh, cool. There's an actual payphone next to a public toilet. I think I can use this. And it's like nobody else in the Alps is taking that picture.
Well, Mark, we really appreciate you coming on and answering all these questions. Do you have any parting notes for Court Gentry fans or fans of you and all your multiple series and books that you have out?
Well, I just appreciate everybody reading, and I hope they will, pick up the book or get it from a library. You can pick up any book in the series and read them. You don't have to read the first 14 before reading this one. That would be awful, but not awful to read, but awful to make as a writer to make somebody do that. So I hope people that have read the books, enjoy this new addition, because it does allow you to see things that have been hinted at and talked about earlier. But if you're new to the series, that's really cool too.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And for all of us at Bestseller Books and the BTB Roundtable with Mark Greaney, don't forget to pick up the Hardline and enjoy the latest edition of Court Gentry. Have a good one.
Thanks.